If someone asks you to prove that Jesus is alive, what we're trying to celebrate in Easter, Jesus is really alive. If someone asks you to prove that Jesus is alive, what would you say? What would you say? How would you prove that Jesus is alive? Today's gospel reminded me of one of my favorite saints that I would speak about if I had to prove to someone that Jesus is alive. His name is Padre Pio. He was an Italian priest who died about 50 years ago. And if you're trying to get a good image of what Padre Pio looks like, where's Lorenzo? Stand up, introduce yourself to the people. If you want a visual, what does Padre Pio look like? That's Lorenzo. He's a seminarian. He's from Vancouver. That's what Padre Pio looks like, okay? So, I'm going to give you 5 cool things about Padre Pio's life to prove. Each one of them proves that Jesus is really alive. And I want you to take these facts to heart so that you can share with people proof that Jesus is alive. First thing, Padre Pio had the stigmata, which means he had the 5 wounds of Jesus. He bore the 5 wounds of Jesus, hands, side, feet, for the last 50 years of his life. And to prove this was not just a biological defect, but a miraculous sign, the blood that came forth from these wounds smelled like flowers. It always breathed forth a fragrance. And many people collected all of the gloves and things that he used to try to maintain the blood that flowed forth. I have a relic here of Padre Pio, one of the gloves, a part of the glove that carried his blood. And if you get really close, maybe you'll smell flowers. You could see pictures online of the stigmata that he bore, a sign on a deeper level that he had a deep intimacy with Jesus, that Jesus was really alive in this man's very body. Second thing, Padre Pio battled Satan. He really did. Just as Jesus battled Satan, Padre Pio regularly had fisticuffs with the prince of evil. And so in one way, Padre Pio was like the worst roommate ever because he regularly woke people up in the middle of the night by his fights with Satan. Proof that Jesus is alive. Third, Padre Pio could read souls. He could read the souls of people. Jesus gave him this gift that he could read the souls of people. One woman, she gave testimony that she went to confession once and she said to Padre Pio, "I don't know what to say." Padre Pio said, "Then I will tell you." The woman recounts, "He proceeded to tell me the entire story of my life in meticulous detail. And then he asked, 'Do you have something to add?' She mentioned one sin that she had planned to confess. And then he said, 'That's the one I was waiting for.'" There are dozens of accounts of Padre Pio reading the souls of people to show that Jesus was really alive in this man's body. He was really alive. As a result, many people, there might be some very old Italian people here who've seen Padre Pio because he died 50 years ago. And so on some days, Padre Pio would be in the confessional for guess how many hours? What's the longest you've played video games for in a day? Huh? How many hours? How many hours do you think you played video games in a day? Okay. 12? Even more than 12 hours. 16 hours he was in that confessional box. You had people lining up for weeks to see him. Because Jesus was alive in this man's body. People had to see him in the flesh. Fourth, my favorite one of all, bilocation, which means you can be in 2 locations at the same time. Padre Pio never left the convent that he was staying in, but there are dozens of stories of him showing up in other places at the same time. My favorite one of all is that Padre Pio actually helped to build a hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo. And during World War II, there was a lot of fear that this hospital he had just helped build would be destroyed. He promised all the people, trust me, no bomb is going to touch this hospital. And to make sure it happened, Padre Pio bilocated. He would regularly show up in the middle of the air, directing traffic of planes that were flying to San Giovanni Rotondo with bombs. And there are multiple pilots from different countries who have accounts of seeing this man who looked like Lorenzo, but just picture a brown habit, up in the air, directing traffic, moving people away. And one American pilot found Padre Pio, and they had quite a conversation, and he converted to the Catholic faith as a result of finally finding this man that was directing traffic in the air. Fifth, healing. Jesus was really alive in this man's body. And so Padre Pio could heal people in the same way that you read in the Gospels. One woman, her name is Gemma Di Giorgio. When she was a little girl, Gemma visited Padre Pio asking to be healed because when Gemma was born, she was born without pupils. She was blind from birth. She had no pupils. Padre Pio prayed for her. Miraculously, she immediately gained perfect sight. She still did not have pupils, and yet she could see perfectly. It's called a miracle. And yet Padre Pio's story is not just something we should be able to tell people, to say, Jesus is alive, look at this man's life. It should challenge us to have Jesus alive in my life. That maybe one day someone could say, let me tell you the story of Father Richard Conlon, of how Jesus was alive in my life, and how Jesus was alive in your life. The life of Padre Pio is not just something we should be inspired by to tell other people, but it should challenge us. I want Jesus alive in my life. Padre Pio said his secret for why Jesus was so much alive in his life. Do you know what it was? What was his secret? You're going to receive his secret in a couple minutes. In your body. And the same Jesus that was alive in Padre Pio's body is going to be alive in your body. Do we get this? The same Jesus that was alive in Padre Pio's body, for those who are going to receive communion, will be alive in your very body as well. The whole reason why I felt inspired to share the story of Padre Pio is because Padre Pio came up with this prayer that he said every time he received Jesus in Holy Communion. This was a prayer he said, and it's based upon today's gospel. This was a prayer, he said, for Jesus to stay with him, to stay alive in him. Because apart from Jesus, Padre Pio, as you'll hear in this prayer that I'll say, apart from Jesus, he got nothing. But when Jesus is alive in his body, it changes everything. So as I say this prayer, I invite you to close your eyes and make this a prayer of your heart as well. Padre Pio is going to continually repeat 4 words. Stay with me, Lord. And I really invite you, I'm going to say now, and I'm going to say at the end of Mass, to make this a prayer of your heart as well. So this is what Padre Pio would say to Jesus every time he received Holy Communion. Stay with me, Lord, for it is necessary to have you present so that I do not forget you. You know how easily I abandon you. Stay with me, Lord, because I am weak and I need your strength that I may not fall so often. Stay with me, Lord, for you are my life, and without you I am without fervor. Stay with me, Lord, for you are my light, and without you I am in darkness. Stay with me, Lord, to show me your will, so that I hear your voice and follow you. Stay with me, Lord, for I desire to love you very much and always be in your company. Stay with me, Lord, if you wish me to be faithful to you. Stay with me, Lord, for as poor as my soul is, I want it to be a place of consolation for you, a nest of love. Let me recognize you as your disciples did at Emmaus in the breaking of the bread, so that the Eucharistic communion be the light which disperses the darkness, the force which sustains me, the unique joy of my heart. Stay with me, Lord, because at the hour of my death, I want to remain united with you, if not by communion, at least by grace and love. Stay with me, Lord. I do not ask for your consolation because I do not merit it, but the gift of your presence. Yes, I ask this of you. Stay with me, Lord, for it is you alone I look for. Your love, your grace, your will, your heart, your spirit, because I love you, and I ask no other reward but to love you more and more. With a firm love, I will love you with all my heart while on earth, and continue to love you perfectly during all eternity. Amen. This was the secret of Padre Pio. This is why Jesus was alive in his body. He received Jesus every day in Holy Communion, and he begged Jesus throughout the rest of the day, stay with me, Lord, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. Stay with me, Lord. That was his secret. Holiness is not getting to some stage of perfection where you don't need Jesus. Holiness is needing Jesus every single moment of your life. Holiness is needing Jesus like our lungs need oxygen. That's what holiness is. Padre Pio shows us a new way to live. So I invite you, as we enter into this Mass, to really make this a prayer of your heart too. That you're going to cry out to Jesus. Stay with me, Lord.